Live from the People's Bank Theater, in conjunction with the Mid-Ohio Valley Learning About Addiction Group, the News Center CBS 47 presents Heroin Epidemic, a town hall forum. Now, here's our host, David Carl.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us here tonight in the historic People's Bank Theater in downtown Marietta. We're live on WIYE-CBS 47 and streaming live at thenewscenter.tv for tonight's program, Heroin Epidemic, a Town Hall Forum.
Even if you're not seeing it in your neighborhood, it takes just a few moments of surfing on the internet or watching the news to understand the statistics on heroin use are pretty grim. Many states, including Ohio and West Virginia, are reporting increases in deaths from heroin and painkillers, often in public places like a church restroom, a city bus, or a baby's room in a hospital. We've all heard our legal system is overwhelmed, law enforcement is stretched, and hospitals are flooded with people with dramatic problems. Our schools are facing issues beyond expectation to serve students, and our social support systems are struggling to accommodate increases.
The audio's over the air, everybody.
Need services. Communities are dealing with drug-related crime and fear, but are not rushing to support those who need it. And this doesn't even begin to express what's happening to the people who are reeling from heroin's devastating consequences, like the family of 17-year-old Hunter Berkey, who was killed by an overdose last August.
I don't know why he would have tried this drug. He was a very smart child, but it doesn't discriminate. There's a stigma in our area about what a druggie is, and that's not always true. Kids think that they're indestructible. You just expect you'll wake up and it won't have happened, really, that it'll be all just a big nightmare.
He's a wonderful boy, and he should have grown up to be a man, but he didn't get that chance.
The joys of live television there, folks. This was the story of Hunter Berkey, a 17-year-old who unfortunately was killed tragically by a heroin overdose 8 months ago. We're here tonight because his story is like the story of so many others here in the Mid-Ohio Valley, and some people may think we're just trying to use shock tactics to scare you, but that's really our reality here in the Mid-Ohio Valley. And we're here tonight because of the efforts of people like Dawn Spur and her organization Mid-Ohio Valley Learning About Addiction. Now, her efforts have inspired us to kind of assemble this panel for this forum, and we have a collection of experts, as you see here. We're going to hear from each one of them. Before we get to our panel, we'd like to speak to Ohio's U.S. Senator Sherrod Brown for his thoughts about this epidemic sweeping our part of the nation. Senator, thank you.
Thank you very much, David, and it's an honor to be here. Kelly and your rock sister, I'm so sorry for your loss, and I've met a number of people here tonight already who have come up and shared their story with me, and you hear these numbers and statistics around the state. 2,500 Ohioans died of overdoses last year, more than were killed in car accidents. And when we think of a lot of things when we think about that, and I think so much about the individual families where addiction has just taken over and turned the family upside down. Sometimes that terrible addiction ends up in an overdose and death. Sometimes that addiction is just so disruptive for these families and changes their lives. And I look at, I spoke earlier today with Dawn Spur, and she began, if I could partially tell your story, she used to teach grade school and then high school, and or maybe the reverse, and she saw some of these, she went to too many funerals and saw too many other kids that were struggling, and she realizes what this has meant to this entire community. I mean, Marietta struck me as always a city, in Washington County and Beverly and Churchtown and Belpre, always communities that came together in the face of difficulty, and I think that shows this tonight. But I see people, I met the Hollands earlier, who have a neighbor who lost their son. And I think about Hunter and think about so many of you. I was with a middle-aged woman in Niles, Ohio, a smaller city north of Youngstown, and her son became addicted at 14. He's been in and out of treatment for 12 years. Their entire family has dealt with this because it's not obviously it's not just the addicted young man or young woman, it's the entire family. So I guess my role here is just to tell you briefly that we're trying to figure this out nationally. I mean, we need better partnerships between the federal government and state government and communities. We need more money to scale up treatment centers. Nobody, I was in Chillicothe the other day talking about this. Nobody expected the numbers of people that have become addicted and have battled opioids in the last 10 years, especially the last 5 years in Ohio. And governments, state government's not done its job. The federal government hasn't provided the help to scale up these treatment centers. We need to look at everything from medication-assisted treatment to providing naloxone to schools when we need it, or to certainly to first responders, to sharing our stories with each other. And I'm hopeful tonight with this panel that the stories shared that you will share with others, because one of the things that Dawn said to me was that people still in the community don't quite know this is afflicted in sort of epidemic proportions Ohio. It's not just Washington County, it's not just Southern Ohio, it's not just Ohio. Some states, it's even worse than here. So this is a national problem, not recognized by far too many people because they haven't seen it up close. So my real message to you is, to push us in Congress and the state legislature to do our jobs, to be sure. But my other message to you is share your stories. Those that have had loved ones die, those that have had friends who've had loved ones die, or people that are addicted that have recovered, like Mr. Adams that I talked to before here, and sharing that story so this community understands it, and people beyond those of you that were so personally affected by this. So thank you for coming out and rising to the occasion. We are working on legislation in Washington that I think will help. We've got to provide dollars with this, so that you can upscale treatment centers. There aren't enough of them. There aren't enough doctors. There aren't enough healthcare providers to have the capacity to do what we need to do. But it's something that we will figure out, because we always do in this country. And you really are on the front lines because you recognize that you have loved ones. You show love for them. You're not judgmental. This is not a character flaw in a young man or young woman. This is an addiction. This is an illness. This is like alcoholism. This is like an eating disorder where people get addicted and they simply can't fight their way out without assistance from loved ones and assistance from communities. So I applaud you for that. I thank you for your involvement, for the people you love and the community you love. You will clearly make a difference as we fight this opioid epidemic all over our country. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you. She can take that right off. Thank you, Senator Brown. We're going to move on now to our panelists. We'd like to take a moment for each of these individuals to introduce themselves, talk about why they're here, and something along the lines of this forum is important for the community. Sheriff Minks, feel free to start.
Larry Minks, Washington County Sheriff. Sometime, within the last 5-10 years, I think that this community started to wake up and realize that we had an epidemic, a heroin problem. Our kids were dying. In the last 18 months in Washington County, we've had over 30 deaths resulting from heroin or pills or the opiate overdoses. Now, as the sheriff of Washington County, my job, of course, is to enforce the laws and go after the people who are bringing the drugs in. We are primarily a demand area. We have people here who need the drugs. So we have people out of Columbus and Cleveland and Detroit coming down here and selling to our kids. But I realize that I have a 124-bed facility, a jail, and we cannot arrest our way out of this program. We cannot put everybody in jail that's involved with the drugs. We need to look at early interdiction, the Start Talking program, talking to your kids, anything that we can do earlier in life of our young people to get them on the right track. So it takes a joint effort, and I'm really glad to see the enthusiasm and the participation of people coming out tonight. And I hope that we are able to maybe not completely solve the problem, but at least give you some idea of what we think should be done to curb this problem here in Washington County.
Kathy Harper.
I'm Kathy Harper. I'm the coordinator for the Right Path for Washington County, and it's our drug-free community coalition. And I've been involved in this battle with the sheriff for at least 15 years, predominantly as a mom. And then we had another coalition, it was called the Turning Point. And now we're all about prevention. The Right Path is really geared for preventing drug and alcohol abuse and use among 6th through 12th grade students in Washington County. And our goal is just, if we can make a difference for one, then we know that we've been successful. We work a lot with the sheriff. We believe in Medication Take-Back Day. Although we really focus on prevention, we recognize that we are unable to prevent everything. But we do have alternatives. In the summer, we have dances and we have swim parties. And our swim parties are really to get and encourage parents to spend a couple of hours together. Because we know there's a wealth of research that tells us that if we talk to our kids and spend time with our kids, that we can reduce their drug abuse and use by 50%. And if you're a mom, a parent, then you'll take those odds, okay? And, you know, we really encourage everyone to get involved in what we're doing. We're working with Dawn Spur's group and also the Belpre group because we really believe in the start talking. And maybe if we would have started this conversation 15 years ago, we would have a different outcome. I'm not going to steal Judge Lane's thunder because he's got a fantastic book and he's going to talk about it, but it's really a history of how we got here. And you know, just because we're here now, we don't have to stay in this place.
Thank you very much. We're going to, try and move along a little quick because we got a lot of topics to get to. Tim Kraft, please.
My name's Tim Kraft. I'm the director of Dream Life. We have a one-year discipleship program where we deal primarily, it seems to be heroin mostly, but any type of addictions people are dealing with. The reason this is so dear to my heart is I was a 12-year opioid user and I overcame it, so I have such a compassion for this. And also losing family members to drug overdoses, my sister being one, it just put really a burden on me to want to fight against this thing, which is trying to destroy this community. So,
Mr. Kraft, thank you for joining us. Judge Lane.
Okay, I'm Ed Lane. I've fought this for 30 years. I've been an honor to be a judge in this county for 30 years. This program's a good program. There was a time when I was municipal judge, not this person, but his organization was the only person that was offering a program that this court could use, my court could use. I've seen programs come and go. We've got L&P Services. It is a fantastic program. They are fighting addiction on many fronts. The bottom line is we're not getting enough assistance from the state or the United States government. There is a game changer, and it's the book Dreamland by Sam Quinones. Every elected official, every professional person, every doctor, every lawyer in America should read this book. Sam Quinones was a journalist in the West. He spent 5 years researching the history of the heroin epidemic. Ground zero was Portsmouth, Ohio, and the Ohio Valley. And the figures are astounding of what we've been through. It was a perfect storm. Politicians, drug companies came together with Madison Avenue and questionable advertising techniques. And when the federal government realized they had a problem and started fighting it criminally, then the heroin stepped in from Jalisco State in Mexico. They're heroin traffickers. But everyone should read this book now. The bottom line is, my opinion is there's no one solid way out of this. We all have to try everything we can. We have to try NA, AA, formal counseling groups, but it's going to be it has to be a broad approach, and we need the commitment of everybody in this society. These people that I see in my court are good people. They're not bad people, but they've got a horrible addiction, and I usually see them on their worst day. And sometimes you do have to send them to jail or prison to get their attention and get them motivated to get help. They're great manipulators. And what the thing about heroin is, it takes everything else away from them. All they can think about is heroin. They can't think about their family, their future, their jobs, and it has to be a strong approach, and we need a lot of help.
Thank you, Judge Lane.
So long.
Moving on now, Drew Marshall.
Hello, my name is Drew Marshall, and I'm a recovering addict. I basically just want to be able to help anybody that needs to get out of the cycle of addiction. That's my whole goal here.
Okay. Thank you for coming on. Dr. Masson.
My name is Dr. Robert Masson, and I treat addiction, and my goal is to get people out of the cycle of addiction.
Thank you all for coming on. We're going to go ahead and get right into our first question for Sheriff Minks and Kathy Harper. Every community has a problem with drugs across the United States, pretty much. Unfortunately, that's nothing new. But new U.S. News and World Report Heroin Epidemic study says abuse has increased most drastically in the Midwest. So what exactly is happening in our area, and how is it different from what was happening 10 to 20 years ago? Sheriff Minks.
Well, like I mentioned before, it's a result of, in the early 2000s, we were experiencing oxycodone. Oxycontin was being prescribed right and left, and we had a large number of people who became addicted to that. And then we found that the heroin, organized crime people started moving in here in cells. We know that most of the heroin that comes into Ohio is coming out of Jalisco and Marietta in Mexico, the Sonora Valley. It comes up and it's split, delivered, comes into Columbus, and the way it is brought down is you can buy a balloon of heroin in Columbus between $5 and $7. You can come down here and you can get $35 to $50 out of it. So supply and demand, economics, people are coming down here. They know that we have the demand for it. Now, in the earlier years, you say how it's different. We were dealing with marijuana and cocaine and overage drinking and things like that. Well, those became gateway drugs, and those drugs led to harder things, and now we're really faced with a lot of people who have a dependency upon the opioids.
Kathy Harper.
Well, another way that it's changed is because it's legal for someone. So if you had a family member that was using, say, OxyContin for a legitimate reason, and then you were visiting their house, they may think because your symptoms mirrored theirs that they were safe to share their medication. But we know that it's illegal to use any legal medication illegally. So, but that's one reason that it's changed. The other is that a lot of people go into their parents' or grandparents' homes, and a lot of older people keep their medication on their kitchen counter. So it's not difficult for someone to help themselves. We used to call it peer pressure, but now it's called peer access because it's much easier for them to access the drugs.
Sure. Dr. Masson, those responses lead me to another question. They both mentioned gateway drugs. Why specifically heroin, and have we found that prescription painkillers, opioids, have kind of a gateway effect for heroin?
Prescription drugs get expensive. They're easily accessible. Oxycodone sells for $1 a milligram. At least, might be even more now. So the Oxy 30, as it's called, it's $30. Some people do 3, 4, up to 7, 8 a day. It gets expensive. Along comes a heroin dealer. Instead of spending $80 to $100 in a day, you can get it for 20. So somebody who never dreamed of using a needle uses a needle.
Sure. Something I want to get to now that Sheriff Minks referenced in his intro for you, Judge Lane. Jails around the nation house thousands of addicts, and courts keep seeing the same people repeatedly. Can you explain the situation's impact on law enforcement and specifically the legal system?
We see our failures. We don't see our success stories. I can't walk down the street in this town without somebody thanking me for helping them get sober. We're going to win this one person at a time, but it's going to take a lot of effort and a lot of commitment. Yes, we see a lot of the same people, the hardcore cases, and it's very difficult to judge, for a judge to decide where they're at with their addiction and how serious they are to get straight and sober. Sure. And there will be failures. They will fall off the wagon. It's not something that you can just cure instantly, but you never give up on anybody.
Thank you. This next question for Dr. Masson, for Drew Marshall, and for Tim Kraft. Medical professionals' responsibilities have shifted. Doctors face increased scrutiny and patients with incredibly complicated medical situations, among other things. What's happening right now with medical professionals, hospitals, and patients' medical conditions, and what types of care do addicts need? Let's start with Dr. Masson.
The question is, what kinds of care do addicts need?
And what's happening right now with medical professionals, with hospitals, with patients' medical conditions, and what kind of care do they need?
Well, a little history that leads into what the sheriff has already said. In the 90s, patients were complaining that their pain wasn't adequately treated. That started a whole industry. Purdue Pharmaceuticals started synthesizing long-acting, more powerful drugs like OxyContin. The Joint Committee on Accreditation of Hospitals called pain the fifth vital sign, mandated it be treated adequately through patient surveys before they'd certify a hospital. That led to the overprescribing of all these drugs and the tsunami effect that we see today, and it's tied into the heroin. Now the pendulum's swinging the other way, because we saw the devastating effects that it had right around 2007. The biggest cause of death in people between 18 and 35 years old in Ohio had been motor vehicle accidents. In 2007, it became death from overdose of prescription drugs. Governor Strickland at the time formed the opioid task force. So now the pendulum's swinging the other way. Medical practitioners are urged to prescribe less. The CDC, Center for Disease Control, just came out with some new guidelines. The Ohio State Medical Board has been way ahead of that. I'd say 2 years ago we came out with those similar guidelines. There are less drugs prescribed, and now what we need are more practitioners to treat the addiction that's out there. And I'm an addictionologist. I'm also a pain physician as well. And I work for a company that has 5 centers in Ohio. We're the only organized system to treat addiction. And what we like is when people get discharged from the court and they need aftercare, they come to our center, and then we can take care of them afterwards and help keep them sober. We have an 80% retention rate in our program.
I'll ask a follow-up on that, and either one of you feel free to follow up on that as well. Is there a balance? You mentioned overprescription due to the vital sign being categorized as pain there, and there's been a pullback since then. Where's the happy medium? It may be an impossible question to answer.
It is hard. I am board certified in both pain medicine and addiction, so I am bilingual in this. But there are other doctors who are board certified in neither. So the poor family doctor has only 15 minutes to see a patient and make a decision, and the patient's crying, literally crying, putting pressure on the practitioner. I need more, I need the higher strength, I need that, and it becomes a lot easier to just write it. The criteria to use is, what's the objective evidence for your pain? We can't measure pain. I can't put a meter on Drew and say, oh, she does have X amount of pain. But you can look at an MRI, and you could look and see if the objective findings on the tests match the complaint. And if they do, now you have a legitimate platform to begin treatment. But if they do not match, now you have to hold your line. Sure. It doesn't make you popular as a doctor.
I think that my addiction started with prescription pills, so it is an issue that they're so readily available to people. But to treat it, I believe on your first question is, I don't think we can put people into an environment where they're only abstaining from using drugs. I think that something has to happen while they're there. where they are having a transformation on the inside of them. Because like Sheriff said, we cannot take someone and arrest our way out of it, because you can take them and put them in a jail cell for a year, and if they never find freedom inside of their self, they're going to come out and do the exact same thing again. So they have to be in a So our approach to this is we are a faith-based treatment, and I can say this from my experience personally. I went to Suboxone, methadone, detox, and I went back every single time because nothing ever changed in here. But once I got to the place where I gave it to Jesus and allowed him to carry it for me, and I'm talking to you guys, I want you to understand, as someone who wasn't raised in church or anything. So one experience in the true presence, I had a life-changing encounter, which then I found truth, and then I found freedom, and then I found identity, and then I found purpose. And this is kind of the approach we go at. If we can show them their purpose and who they truly are, they won't be so quick to run back to the things that they're familiar with.
Thank you. Drew, I want to get to you on this next question. We're going to move on here. The epidemic means that our schools include more children with a complicated mix of problems, and social services like foster care and children's services are struggling to keep up with increases in cases. Can you explain what's happening with schools in your experience in social services?
You talking to me?
I would like to hear from Drew and from Judge Lane.
Who are you directing that to?
I'm sorry?
Who are you directing?
I can't hear him either.
Drew and Judge Lane. The two of you.
Us.
Drew.
There's an echo here.
There's an echo here. Okay,
Is there an echo in here? Is there an echo in here?
You want to go first?
I didn't hear what he asked.
He wants to know what we can do in schools and social services.
I think the best thing that you could do at schools would be to educate children, but start young. You can't start at 15 years old. By 15, children already know about drugs. They're already, if they haven't already tried it, they're interested in it. If you start younger, not 5, but, 10, 12, at the time when they enter, junior high and high school, the more they know, the better equipped they are to deal with it. You can't just throw somebody into a fish tank or shark tank and expect them to know how to get away.
Most of the pre-sentence investigations I get, a lot of these people grew up in drug families. Their families used drugs. Their parents, their siblings, their cousins. And so you've got to not to just educate the young people, you have to educate the family. Most of the schools I see are drug-free because of the efforts of the sheriff with his drug dog. We don't have a lot of, but it's in the collateral, in the communities, the neighborhoods. And so sometimes it almost seems generational to me. But this gentleman's right. You've got to address the addiction, but you've also got to, like the SEPTA program shows these people they can get a job and earn a living. There's a place for them in this society. Most of these people I see have skills, have abilities, but it's been stripped away from them. And you have to restore that confidence in themselves. And that's a big part of it. Yeah. But it's got to be the whole family. It can't, and it's got to be, that's all I've got to say about that.
Moving on to the next questions for Tim Kraft, and we're going to have some of our front row contributors here as well. What are families and friends of addicts experiencing? Tim, this is for you, and I'd also like to talk to Deidre, I'm going to mispronounce your first name, Deidre, Holland, Kelly Allman, and Kim Holbert, our front row contributors. Tim, feel free to take it away, and we'll get a microphone to
Well, I know that a lot of the families I deal with, it's almost like they're to a place where they're almost done with dealing with it. And this is where we step in, because it can almost get to a place where you hear so much negativity being an addict to where you start believing this about yourself, so you never think nothing positive. And so they're really going through a tough time, but it's important for them to have a group of people that can step in and really, we practice this thing, it's called a culture of honor, to where we're going to show the value in each person, because if they don't see it in themselves, if we can pull it out of them, then we might just open up something they never knew they had and just put them on a path they never dreamed was possible. So we really believe that the families are heavily affected, but what's amazing is when they see someone transformed a year later, how great it can restore and change a whole family. So as badly as family and friends are affected because they've been stolen off of, they've been lied to, they've been manipulated. Like he said, drug addicts are great manipulators.
Sure.
That's the truth. But so they're really hurt. And that's why it takes a community of people to step in and show these people their value, because it's so personal to the families to the point where they're almost done with it.
Deidre?
Yes. You were asking just about how hard it is on a family. It can totally tear your family apart. The drugs become the only thought. I read something today about if you have an envelope of money, say $200 in it, and you can't find that money, you're frantic. And you just want to find that money. That's all you can focus on. You're responsible for that money. You've got to have it. And if you don't, you can't think about your job. You can't think about your kids. You can't think about your mother, your father. And that's what these addicts go through. They are looking for that envelope, but it's a high. It's their drug. And I think the hardest thing is just seeing your child go through that and not knowing how to help. And I could not be more grateful for Dawn Spur's just involvement in trying to help these kids. She loves them very much, and she is a wonderful person to try to get this all somehow resolved, and we're not going to solve it in one night.
Thank you. Kelly Ullman.
With Hunter, we didn't have this problem of him. We didn't know anything was going on wise. We're not sure exactly why he tried the heroin or anything like that. So we didn't have to go through worrying for him. It just all took us by surprise. And when we found him, he had already OD'd. I'm going to let my sister talk. The after effects is that we all wonder why we didn't notice anything. You know, his friends had not a clue. It just came complete surprise. And I don't know if the shock is more that way or going through what everyone else is going through with the stealing and everything.
Thank you. We're going to move on to the next question now for Dr. Masson, Drew Marshall, and Kathy Harper. What are some signs that a person might have a problem? We just heard, there's not always signs, but some indications on a potentially regular basis. Dr. Masson?
A tip I want to use this opportunity to give families is these drugs are costly. They're getting the money somewhere, and they are manipulators. And they manipulate all the family members. And the family members think they're helping. But if they're asking you for money, you have to start to be suspicious. If a guy is 20 and he's asking his grandmother for $20 to go on a date, these are stories I've heard, you have to begin to suspect something. If you follow the money, you find the truth. And one of the first things I do when I have an intervention with a family is I say, where is he getting the money? And then everybody looks down at the floor, because everyone has been giving him something because they feel sorry and they want to help and they don't want him to do without. And deep down in their hearts, they know the money's being used for something wrong. So don't enable like that. Be hard.
Tough love, right? Drew Marshall.
That was mine. But I guess being secretive is a very good one. You don't want to have to admit to your family what you're doing, what you're spending your money on, what you're spending the money that they've given you on. And you just end up turning your back on everybody that you ever loved. So, I guess secretiveness.
Kathy Harper?
I would agree with that. Follow the money, and also they're spending a lot of time alone. If they're still in school, their grades could be slipping. Maybe they're changing their friends. Their appearance is not as important as it used to be. So maybe not just all of those things, but two, as a parent, you know your child and you know something's not right. Okay, I mean, you can lift up floorboards, take pictures off walls, look behind them, check things in medicine cabinets and everything else, and still you may miss it. But some of the easy ones, like the money, spending time alone, and things like that are really important to watch for.
Okay. Next topic to Mr. Kraft and to a few of our front row contributors, Liz Ford, Patrice Pooler, and Chuck Larrick. We're going to move on to what's in place right now. We've already spoken about this, Mr. Kraft, a little bit, in terms of substance abuse prevention, education, and training.
I think it's very important to start young because what's happening is the drugs are being introduced into the schools. So one thing that we try to do is reach out to youth and just kind of share stories of that we've been through, and we do different things trying to just make them aware of, man, it seems all right. You start off smoking a little weed, and it always does start with something simple as weed, but before you know it, man, you're jamming a needle in your arm and you're an addict, and it happens like that. It literally happens so fast. So I think that awareness to get in there and just to be real with them, to be honest, like, look, man, I've lost my sister, I've lost two of my aunts to this, and it all started with something because it was fun in the beginning and it seemed like it wouldn't be a problem. So I think just being honest and upfront with them is a great way to start.
Thank you. Liz Ford?
I think it's important that people realize that there is hope and there is help and that there are resources available. There are lots of places that you can turn to ask questions if you have any suspicions or any concerns, and it's up to all of us to play a role in our community. I also think it's important to remember that, as we say often, prevention works, treatment is effective, and people do recover.
Thank you. Patrice?
I agree with everything that was said. I also think it's important to tell the secrets. And I think it's important to tell the stories because people know people, and it's easy, I think, to look at someone that's addicted and maybe judge them by their behaviors, but look beyond the behaviors to what's going on. You know, educate the teachers, educate the parents, and tell the stories because the stories need told. And like Liz was saying, there is hope. You know, this is a disease that's not curable, but it is treatable, and treatment does work, and it's important to tell the stories and not keep the secrets.
That's why we're here tonight. Chuck Larrick.
Yes, at LMP Services, about 3 years ago, we started increasing our services for alcohol and drugs. We noticed the epidemic, and we started responding with some medication-assisted treatment. And since then, our groups have gotten much larger. We have intensive outpatient, which consists of 9 counseling sessions a week. So we've really beefed up our services trying to meet the needs of the epidemic. And the groups have been very successful, and we just realized recently that a lot of people don't even know that we've been doing Vivitrol treatments for about 6 months. So we're finding that the medication-assisted treatment, along with the group counseling and family counseling, has been very effective, and we're seeing a lot of success. So we'd like the community to be aware of the success that we're seeing. I also like to mention I really appreciate what Tim said a little bit ago about having a purpose, because we just recently, our agency's named LMP, and we just recently decided to put some words to those initials. It used to stand for Larry and Phipps, the people that started it, but we decided to call it Life and Purpose. And we realized that when people have a purpose, it can redirect and make them much better in their search. So I appreciate the comments that you made about that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Larrick. Moving on to our next topic, going to be for Sheriff Minks, Judge Lane, Dr. Masson, Tim Kraft, and Jolie Karanik in our front row. Obviously, we all want to fix the problem, but if it were easy to fix, it'd be fixed at this point. What are our biggest obstacles? Sheriff?
Well, I think financially, there is this drug, Vivitrol, that I know probation departments in several counties nearby are using that, and it's a one shot. It'll last the whole month, hopefully, and the person, when they get out of incarceration, they're under the control of a probation officer. And it's all voluntary on their part, and of course, I think this shot costs over $500, and maybe close to $700, I'm not sure. But anyway, it's a matter of finances, people to monitor the program and the drug itself, and so we certainly could use more money as far as going into the mental health and addiction services, because a lot of times mental health recovery does play a big part in how people are treated. So I would say money is the bottom line.
Okay. Judge Lane, your thoughts?
One of the things that we ran into is we've worked for years to get a halfway house here. Halfway houses will be run by the Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Corrections. We just met so much community opposition that they backed off. I was at a meeting yesterday and I was at a meeting the day before. It's not off the drawing table, but the big problem they're having is they can't find a place in Washington County to build a halfway house where it won't meet community resistance. Folks, we need to realize there's nobody in this county that doesn't know somebody that's been affected by addiction.
All right.
Thank you. We need to get our head out of the sand and say it's here, it's our problem. This is something, if we started advocating it with our legislators, the Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Corrections, it will get done. But it's not going to get done until this community says we want it.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you, Judge Lane. Dr. Basum.
As an addictionologist, by law, I'm limited to 100 patients. It's a bad law.
Yes.
It was written in 2000, I think. There's legislation to expand that. Sherrod Brown is one of the sponsors. I don't know what's holding it up. But that would be like if Judge Lane could only hear 100 cases. The sheriff could only arrest 100 people. So that's all needed. Money,
Why is that
halfway
law in the
houses.
books? I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you. Why is that law in the books? Any idea?
Why what?
Why is that law on the books in the first place?
I don't know.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
I can't get an answer. I can't get an answer. I just know it's stuck in the legislative process. And each year it's promised. It's in its third year now. But with all of that, even if we had unlimited resources and I could see an unlimited number of patients and we had halfway houses and IOPs, they gotta want it. I used to be a big mountain climber, and one time I was doing an ascent to the Grand Teton with a guy who just came back from Everest. He was the third person to ascend Everest without oxygen, Rob Hess. And I looked at him and I said, was it hard to climb without oxygen? And he looked at me and he goes, you gotta want it. And I think of that. And half of my battle on the front lines in the clinic is, do they want it? Or are they going through the motions? Self-Refine, which is the clinic we run, it takes insurance, and they have no skin in the game. Are they there because they could just get it now? So part of my soul searching when I do my interviews is, do they really want this? We can't force that. It's like pushing a rope. So,
can I interject something?
Go ahead.
I think we all need to start talking every chance we get to our elected officials at the state, national, and local level. They want to get reelected, and they need to realize what this issue has done to us. For example, most insurance policies will only pay a limited amount of money for treatment. That law should be changed. It should be up there with cancer, it should be up there with heart disease, it should be up there with everything we are fighting. There are so many laws that need changed, just like the doctor said. Not only the insurance law needs changed, there's a law that now that there just needs to be so many laws changed. And if they're aware of it, they'll get busy and change them. They've started doing it a little bit, but we've got a long ways to go, folks. And the law is a big part of the problem.
Mr. Kraft.
I think that money is a big part of it. The resources to be able to take people that need it. Just in the past 2 weeks, I've probably, just due to the space that we have, and we're all ran by donations, and we don't charge people to come in, I've had to turn down probably 7 to 10 people that really needed help, and I try to refer them to other places that maybe they could get into. The realization is most drug addicts don't have the money to pay for an expensive treatment.
Right.
And you can't really put a price on their freedom on top of that. But also something else that, I don't know what's going on. Something else that I think I might catch some backlash for this in a way, but I'm just going to share my heart on it. You can't put a Band-Aid on a bleeding artery and expect it to go away. So for us to say, hey, you give us your heroin, we'll give you this methadone, that's not going to work. They need to see real freedom. So basically what we say to people is this. As long as you don't steal my stuff, I'm okay with you being so bound and addicted and miserable in what you're living in, just as long as you don't mess with my stuff. So in turn, we should be saying to them, hey man, let me get you completely free from all of that stuff and show you what it looks like. So I believe that's a big problem that'll hold it up.
Thank you. Jolie?
The gentleman on the stage spoke quite nicely, all of them, to some of the barriers that we face, some of the things that I heard: money, some laws that make things a little bit difficult. We have difficulty in this area finding medical practitioners, and then with stipulations on the numbers they can treat, that's a barrier. I think another barrier, and this was addressed a little bit, is stigma. We are becoming more knowledgeable as a community, but there's still a lot of stigma placed on addiction, a lot of ignorance out there. It's a disease, but individuals are blamed for the situations that they're in. And I think that if anyone had a choice, really to begin with, they wouldn't choose to be the way that we see most addicts. So I think that we need to be compassionate and remember that it may take someone a number of times going through treatment before they stay clean.
Sure.
That's part of the process. And so educating ourselves, being more compassionate, and also thinking of the interaction. Every interaction could be like, a seed that's planted, and over time they will bloom. So it's not a wasted effort, and that's just a little bit of what I can think of at this moment.
Thank you. I'm going to move on now to your questions for our panelists. Thank you to our panelists and to our front row contributors thus far. We want to move on to your questions. If you're interested in asking a question of our panelists, line up behind either one of these microphones we got in the aisles. We'll be able to hear what you have to say. If you're now just joining us as well, or you missed part of our live forum here on WIYE-CBS 47 and you want to see it again, we'll be showing it twice this weekend. It'll be Saturday, April 9th at noon on WIYE and Sunday, April 10th at 11 a.m. on WTAP. We'll also have this forum on our web channel, thenewscenter.tv, for later viewing. It'll go up sometime this weekend. And if we don't get to your question before the end of our live broadcast, we've got about 10 to 12 minutes left. If we don't get to it, don't worry, we can still ask these questions. We're going to stay on a little bit longer than the live broadcast is going. We'll still be here so we can ask questions of our panelists and continue going on. So without further ado, let's let our first question right up here.
Hi, this is not so much a question, but a comment. I hope that's okay. My name is Pat. I appreciate what you're doing, Tim Kraft. Whom the sun sets free is free indeed. And I'm talking about Jesus. So I believe Jesus is the real answer for people who are addicted to drugs. Benjamin Franklin also said, an ounce prevention is worth a pound of cure, if I'm not mistaken. So for people who are not yet addicted to drugs, I think there's a way to hopefully avoid that. I found a book, All Your Health Questions Answered Naturally, by Dr. Maureen Kennedy Solomon. Got this book in the year 1998. I was interested, were there any non-addictive painkillers? And from this book, I found out that they do exist. And I have a write-up on this subject if somebody's interested. See me afterward for further information. So one of the solutions was a high dosage rate of vitamin C prior to surgery to help against pain after surgery. Another one is LD-phenylalanine, also known as DLPA.
I hate to interrupt you. Do you have a question for our panelists?
No, this is really not a question.
We're trying to keep it, allowing people to ask questions of our panelists so that we have an opportunity for them to answer some questions. We'll have the opportunity definitely to maybe speak with them afterwards, but we want to try and keep it to questions at this point.
Okay, I'll try to finish up here.
Please do.
So for DLPA, it's reported to be as powerful as morphine, yet it's not addictive and has no side effects. Also seems to help in cases of depression. And I found today it's available from the Mother Earth food store in Parkersburg, a bottle for $23 to $24.
I'm going to interrupt you, sir. I think we're going to move on to someone who has a question. Thank you so much for your time. Feel free, sir.
Hi, my name is Chad Spawn. I'm with My Free Ohio. Do you guys believe in statistics? Yes or no, panel? Believe in statistics? Okay. Well, statistics show that in Colorado and Washington, the states where marijuana was legalized, heroin addictions dropped. Violent crime dropped. The thing is to get this out of our streets, get this off of our streets, we need to shut down the cartels that are bringing it here. If we don't, it's just going to keep coming and coming and coming. You can say that, marijuana is a gateway drug, but it has a lot of cures for it, and there's a lot of benefits to it. One of them is helping get people off of addiction in Colorado and Washington. The money used, the money that they make goes towards addiction, setting up places like this. Why isn't this being discussed? Why isn't this being discussed? That's one way to do it. You want to shut it down? Legalize marijuana, sell it at the prices that the cartels are selling it for, and you take the way for it, the mule for heroin to get into our state. I live on the street. I know how it gets here. I've seen more heroin than any one of you guys on that stage at one time. I know how it gets here. Columbus, you're right. You're right, Mr. Manx.
I think the gist of your question, and I want to move on so everybody has enough time, legalization of marijuana potentially to avoid the gateway drug. Sheriff, you and I have had a conversation about this in the past when the Ohio NORML issue was trying to get on the ballot. And we've had this discussion before. Your thoughts on potential legalization of marijuana as an effort to fight potentially more dangerous drugs?
Well, there's a lot of factors involved in that, and I really am opposed to anything that creates another problem out there. We already have a number of...
It's not creating a problem. It's not creating a problem.
If you wouldn't mind, just allow our panelists just a moment to answer. Thank you.
We have a large number of drunk drivers out there already, and if you legalize the marijuana, I think you're going to have even an increased amount of people that are driving impaired, and it's a lot harder for law enforcement also to control this. And there are a number of factors that really would take more time than we have here tonight to discuss it.
Thank you very much. I'm going to move on to our next question.
Okay, first off, I'd like to say personally, I'm ashamed of the questions that were just asked up here. This is not about legalizing marijuana. This is not about what's in your book, sir. This is about the heroin epidemic that we have and taking our community back. Now, my question. First, I'd like to applaud you, sir, for what you're doing, and anything we can do, the Mid-Ohio Valley Bikers in this area can do to help fund your organization, please let us know. I will get you a card when we're done here. We will do a rally. My next question is for all 6 of you on that panel. What can we do as a community to help support each and every single one of you that is trying to make a difference? We all need to.
Thank you, sir. Feel free to lead us off, Dr. Masson.
I'm going to respond to his comment and the comment of the gentleman who's reading the book. One thing we've got to get away from is treating opiate addiction with legal substances such as this. Such as Suboxone, which has an opiate base. You don't cure a disease with the cause of the disease. And you've got to get away from that. And there's all kinds of addictions. And I'm absolutely opposed to legalization of marijuana. It's addictive. It takes control of your life. I've seen too many of those people. And one other comment I want to finish with, and this is probably the last thing I want to say. When it comes to sentencing in my court, what I notice is none of their drug friends are there. Their families are. It isn't their drug friends that show up at court, it's their family.
Thank you. Dr. Masson, you wanted to return that.
Yeah, I live on Buckeye Lake, and probably everybody knows there's big construction there. And I was talking to one of the engineers just 3 nights ago, and he's in your biker group. Yeah. And he said that this biker group was going to get together and find the source of this problem and stomp it out of Marietta. And I was so proud to meet him.
To get this problem solved with all of your guys' help. I mean, our goal is not to be violent about it by any means. That's not our goal. I know a lot of people see a bunch of guys in leather and tattoos, oh, they're out to cause problems. We're not. We want our communities back. I have 5 children. Everybody that's Mid-Ohio Valley Bikers, please stand up. Every single one of these people have kids. They have grandkids. We want our community safe for our children. That's all we want. And we want to help those that have the addiction issues.
I can go. What we need is we need people to mentor these people that we bring in, just to love them. Let's love the hell out of them. That's what we need to do. We need to love them. We need more housing, but even more than that, we need people to step up and say, man, I know this is going to be hard for you, but I will hold your hand and we'll walk through this together. That's what we need.
Thank you very much. Thank you. We've got about a minute left. I want to get to one more question, and we will have time for those other questions after we go off the live broadcast. If you want to go ahead and take the next one, feel free, sir.
Okay. This is more about the dealers more so than people that are addicted. I can have all kinds of compassion for somebody who's going through an addiction. But the sheriff said that you only have a 124-bed facility, and the judge said that he mentioned the sentencing of repeat offenders. Overcrowding is probably the worst excuse I have heard. Dealers in this area do not tend to get sentenced to anything significant. And I'm just curious as to why that is, where an addict gets sentenced to a harsher penalty than a dealer or a trafficker, locally or an out-of-state dealer. That's what frustrates me.
And
why
do
they
suffer?
You want me to answer that?
We have less than a minute.
Okay, a lot of users are dealers. A lot of people, it depends on where they're caught. Sometimes they're caught dealing so they can make money to support their addiction. The other thing that you'll see in my court is you won't see a rubber stamp to everybody. I try to look at each person where they're at, what it's going to take to get their attention, and where to get them help. And there's some people that you have to hit a little harder to get them to deal with their addiction.
Well, recently here in Washington County, a two-time dealer was just given he was out on probation for dealing, got his probation extended, did not go back to jail. That was last fall. And locally here in the Mid-Ohio Valley, a woman got busted for trafficking, got a 3-year probation. That's it. They're not getting anything. They have nothing to be afraid of.
Well,
they're not going to go anywhere.
One of the other problems we have, if it's a 2-time, it would not apply, but in 6
Judge
years...
Lane, I got to cut you off. We're going to continue that as soon as we close out here. We got to close our live broadcast. I want to thank everyone for being a part of this town hall forum. Thank our panelists, our front row contributors, everyone who's asking questions. We're going to continue them in just a moment. A special thanks to the People's Bank Theater here in Mid-Ohio Valley learning about addiction. Thank you so much. You can find out more information about that organization at movlaa.com. I'm David Carl. Thank you so much for tuning in. Have a good night. We're going to continue the conversation in just a moment.
One of the other things that's going on is 6 years ago, the legislature reduced the ability of judges on 4th and 5th degree felonies to send people to prison. Now, I know you don't like to talk about that, but there is now a committee in the state legislature to recodify the Ohio Criminal Code.